Today, I'm talking about the Punisher, one of Marvel's most awesome and most problematic characters. Who is the Punisher? What makes him so controversial? Let's go and find out. The Punisher was created in 1974 by Gary Conway and first appeared in the pages of Spider-Man. When the character proved successful, he was developed further and given a backstory. According to this story, the Punisher is a Vietnam War veteran, returning after the war to a crime-ridden and derelict New York City. When his wife and 2 children are killed in a mafia shootout, the Punisher decides to use his army training and Vietnam experience to start a one-man war against crime, trying to rid New York City of every petty criminal, crime boss and drug dealer. What the Punisher does is he's bringing the war home, from the jungles of Vietnam to the streets of New York City. Then one might think. In reality, 1970s books, films and comic books were filled with Punisher-like characters. Think of The Executioner, Rambo, Magnum Force, Taxi Driver. All of these films reflected the American trauma over the Vietnam War, worries about Vietnam veterans failing to reintegrate into American society, and a crime wave that swept American cities. But the Punisher was not simply part of a literary trend. These were fictional characters meant to deal with real issues. In the 1970s, American cities faced deindustrialization, rising unemployment, failing public services and political corruption. With cities becoming ever more unsafe, the cry for law and order became ever louder. Some even argued that legal procedure should be swept aside in order to effectively fight crime. The Punisher embodied this political outlook and guaranteed raw and hard action scenes. Because of these 2 reasons, the Punisher became an iconic character of the 1970s and 1980s. And by the early 90s, Marvel Comics published 3 simultaneous monthly Punisher comic books. But by 1995, the Punisher was dead, literally. Next to the far more violent comics that were published in the mid-1990s, the Punisher looked rather vanilla. And years of bad artwork and bad storytelling had caused a steady decline in sales, causing Marvel to kill off the character and stop the series. After several attempts at rebooting the character had failed, Marvel Comics brought in Garth Ennis to breathe new life into the Punisher. And boy did he do so. Garth Ennis decided to go back to the roots of the Punisher character and rebuild him from the ground up. According to Garth Ennis, it is not enough to simply understand the Punisher as a character. We must reproduce his world and see it through his eyes. The Avengers, for an example, are classic superheroes. They fight to let the good prevail and offer leniency to bad guys who are basically good guys turned bad by circumstances. Not so for the Punisher. In the Punisher's world, criminals are simply bad guys who cannot be changed or rehabilitated and must thus be punished, must be confronted with preferably lethal force. But Garth Ennis pushes the envelope even further. According to him, the Punisher is not a traumatized war veteran driven by the murder of his wife and children, but a homicidal maniac who loves his war on crime. The murder of his wife and children are not a reason, but rather an excuse for the Punisher to do what he had always wanted to do, namely kill all criminals. And this is the core of his Punisher philosophy. The Punisher operates in a black and white world filled with criminals who cannot be saved and must be punished. Place the Punisher in a different setting, governed by a different morale, and the stories do not work. The Punisher thus requires a double suspension of disbelief. We must not only understand the character, but, for the duration of the story, adhere to the Punisher's philosophy. This approach to the Punisher character allowed Garth Ennis to write some of the most gruesome, most rewarding Punisher stories ever told. For Marvel Comics, however, it mainly created problems. First of all, Marvel has struggled with Punisher's place in the Marvel Universe. Their powers are different. The Punisher wields a gun, while the Avengers can control the weather, fly and shoot lasers. Their battles happen on different scales. While the Punisher catches muggers in the streets, the Avengers go into outer space to save the universe. Basically, placing a homicidal maniac without superpowers next to the Avengers makes both of them look ridiculous. But there are other problems as well. Recently, far-right movements have appropriated the Punisher and his logo. And they do not see the Punisher for what he was intended as, namely a warning against people taking the law into their own hands. No, they see him as an example and as a hero. Ennis had always managed to avoid any identification with the Punisher as a character. In his stories, the Punisher is not somebody to sympathize with, but somebody to fear or feel sorry for. What Ennis shows in his stories is that the Punisher's war is ultimately pointless. That instead of ridding the world of pain and fear, he actually causes more pain and hurting. Faced with ever more alt-right banner waving, Marvel seems to have given up the struggle to reclaim the Punisher and his logo, and instead seems to have decided to fundamentally rewrite the character, even going so far as to give him a new logo and firmly embed him in the Marvel superhero universe. But drawing the Punisher into the Marvel universe continuously leads to weak and convoluted storytelling, in which the Punisher dies, is resurrected and made a pawn of all sorts of groups and organizations. Thus, in 2010, Marvel revived the character as Frankencastle and had him join the Legion of Monsters. And a bit later, Marvel gave him a War Machine suit and made him an agent of S.H.I.E.L.D. And yet later, the Punisher was revived as a member of the mafia mythical organization, The Hand. All of these stories are designed to make the Punisher fit into the Marvel hero universe and to have him not be who he actually is, namely a psychotic, homicidal killing machine bent on taking out every criminal he finds in his way. In the Marvel universe, there is ever less space for characters such as the Punisher. And Garth Ennis' Punisher stories may well prove to be the last good Punisher comics for a long time to come. Thank you for watching this video. If you liked this video, don't forget to like, subscribe and ring the bell. And especially ringing the bell is important, because with all these bells I will exchange them for photon torpedoes, which I will then use to conquer the entire galaxy.